Welcome everybody to Forza Horizon 4, and today we're taking a look at the 1970 Buick GSX. Now this is a car that's part of the Grand Sport series, which is a name that's been used on several high-performance cars from Buick since 1965, and it's usually either a trim level for an existing model like a Skylark, or in this case it's its own model based on an existing platform. So yeah, this was based on the GS455. Where though the GSX was more of a performance and a handling package that was added on to that vehicle, as it has the same engine though with slightly extra torque, but it's the visual changes and the improvements on the underneath that is impressive most. Visual changes include a rear spoiler, ram air hood and decals, whereas underneath it has a quick ratio steering, anti-sway bars front and rear, quad link suspension and a limited slip diff. So yeah, mighty amount of changes to this car over the standard GS455, which didn't have any of that as far as I can find out. So yeah, fairly impressive in that respect. But what sets this car apart from other muscle cars is the fact that it's really rather luxurious on the inside. No GSX really was under-equipped, whereas you could find under-equipped versions of Pontiac's GTOs or Chevrolet Chevelles and the likes, but this came equipped with practically everything. And it's got a 3-speed automatic, though you could get a manual, and yeah, it's fairly well equipped on the interior. It's also got plenty of room in the rear as well if you ever need to take on more than one passenger, and it's got a fairly large boot as well. As you can see, you get a full-size spare tyre in there with plenty of room to spare. But it's the engine where this car impresses most, but not in the rear aspects that you'd expect. Sure, for a 7.5 litre V8 engine it has a decent amount of horsepower at 360, but it's the torque that impresses most at 510 pounds-feet, which was the most amount of torque for an American production performance car for 33 years, only eventually surpassed by the Series 2 V10 Dodge Viper. So yeah, that is really impressive, and even more impressive when you realise that this car's engine weighed 150 pounds less than the similarly sized Chevrolet 454 or the 426 Hemi from Dodge. So yeah, impressive to not weigh anywhere near as much as those two engines, despite having more torque. Now granted, those two engines did have more power than this. The Chevelle had 90 horsepower over this, but yeah, it's that torque that really does help, and when you couple that to the 3-speed automatic, it's able to get through those gears fairly quickly, to the point where it's not all that much slower than the Chevelle, and yeah, manages to match it in terms of 0 to 100 speed, and also in terms is quicker in terms of top speed as well. So yeah, this is easily one of my favourite muscle cars. Quite frankly, it's probably in my top 3. There's not many I can think of that I would prefer over this. There are some that I'd prefer over it in terms of performance or styling, but this is kind of a really solid combination of style, performance, and general likability and charisma. So yeah, nonetheless, let's get out onto the open road and see what this car can do. Now unfortunately they didn't sell very many of these when it was out. Between 1970 and 1972 I think they sold only around less than 1,000. They only sold a few hundred in its first year, so yeah, which is unfortunate really, because this is easily one of the real gems in the classic muscle car era, and yeah, they sell for around $200,000 a piece nowadays. So yeah, incredibly rare and really rather expensive at the moment, but at the time it was only an $1,100 performance and handling package on top of this standard GS455. So yeah, not all that expensive when you consider what you get for your money, and yeah, as far as I'm concerned, it beats other cars like the Chevelle and certain variants of the Mustang in terms of charisma and speed and general likability. So yeah, 0 to 60 time of 6.486 seconds, 0 to 113.5 seconds, and it going to a top speed of 141 mile an hour, which is fairly impressive when you consider this only has a 3-speed automatic, whereas plenty of other muscle cars would have a 4-speed, and they'd certainly have higher RPM rev limit. So yeah, that's fairly impressive. Now granted, that's not quite as quick as a Chevelle to 60, as that can do it in 6.1 seconds, But this does match it in terms of 0 to 100 speed, and it's 10 mile an hour quicker at the top end. So yeah, fairly impressive in that right. Granted, it's not the best handling muscle car from the era. The likes of the Chevelle from 1967 that we've already reviewed is probably the slightly more responsive car in terms of handling, especially since it does have less weight. This weighs a massive 3,874 pounds, which is easily one of the heaviest muscle cars from the period, but it does handle that weight for the most part okay. It's just the fact that it's not quite as responsive as a Chevelle or a Mustang, which will generally weigh less than this. And yeah, because obviously it only has a 3-speed automatic, you're not able to get the most out of that torque at times, or out of that power. But it does mean that you don't have very many in the way of gears to get in the way of acceleration, so as soon as you do get into the third gear, it just roars away really, and yeah, there's obviously nothing stopping it until it gets to the rev limit. So yeah, fairly impressive in terms of acceleration for a car that doesn't have anywhere near the kind of horsepower as other vehicles from the period, while obviously having that extra weight. But it's everything that's combined with this vehicle that really makes it such a treat to drive. I love the looks, I love the engine, I like the noise it makes, I like the speed and the performance. And quite frankly, the only limiting factor to the car is the gearbox. But like I said, you could get a manual with this vehicle, and yeah, if these Forza games did take up my recommendation of being able to, you know, make a car, have a car on here where you basically would get it in the same way that you'd buy it at the time, where you just go into the showroom and, you know, get a options list and go from there, which has always been my big recommendation for Forza games. So you could spec a manual for this, or you could spec the slightly smaller 400 cubic inch engine, or you know, the likes of that. So yeah, if it had the manual, this car would be perfect, but without it, it's about 98% perfect. So yeah, as damn well named, makes perfect as far as I'm concerned, and I'm really glad it's back in the Forza series, as it was a big omission for me in previous Forza games where we've not had this vehicle. So yeah, I'm glad it's here, especially on this game, because yeah, it is really rather fun to drive around these British roads. Such a large, heavy vehicle, but nonetheless a really rather fun one to drive. And yeah, as far as I'm concerned, it's one of the underrated muscle cars in Forza games. Obviously we've had plenty from the 60s and 70s on these on all these numerous Forza games that we've had, but this is the one that I've usually always come back to when we've had the chance to drive it. And yeah, as a result, easily one of my favourites. And yeah, was more than worth getting it out of the festival playlist, which you have to get 50% off to do to get it. But I got it fairly quickly because I was just so eager to drive it. And yeah, highly recommend getting it if you're into your classic muscle cars. If you're not, then you're probably not going to enjoy it, because you're just going to see it as another big boat with a lot of power and not much else going for it. But yeah, I love it, and yeah, I so enjoy having it in the game, and yeah, it just means that we have another muscle car to drive, and that's always a plus point as far as I'm concerned. Nonetheless, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.